It's not often that the credit card industry suffers a major defeat in Congress, but last week it happened twice.
We've done a great deal to protect Wall Street. This bill does a great deal to protect Main Street.
With Americans struggling under $850 billion in credit card debt, a House Financial Services Subcommittee and the full Senate Banking Committee passed two similar bills that would ban many of credit card companies' most abusive practices. For 3 days of voting, it was standing room only, as a glum army of credit card lobbyists watched most of their favored amendments die. But for consumer advocates, it felt like a David and Goliath moment.
We've never seen a Senate committee move legislation to the Senate floor that provides dramatic protections for consumers on credit card abuses.
For the first 18 years I worked in Washington, no bill opposed by the credit card companies was ever even voted on in either this committee or the Banking Committee of the Senate.
There's some 20 years involved in this issue. This is the first time I'm aware that this committee has ever dealt with credit cards.
Who was in the room today?
Mostly banking industry lobbyists. I mean, consumers are completely outgunned at the federal level, but this is typical of Congress. The credit card lobbyists are in the room, the bank lobbyists are in the room. They swarm everywhere. They talk to members of Congress and senators. The consumer folks, there's a few of us, and we do our best, but we have a hard time keeping up.
How many consumer lobbyists were in the room today?
3.
This bill restores fairness to credit cards and brings back the notion that a deal is a deal.
Last year, New York Representative Carolyn Maloney introduced the Credit Card Holders Bill of Rights, which passed the House by a margin of 200 votes. But the bill died in the Senate. Then in December, the Federal Reserve got into the act, issuing its own set of credit card regulations. But they don't take effect until July of 2010.
That is why we're here today to consider this bill. The bill protects...
With the cries of squeezed consumers ringing in their ears, Representative Maloney and Senator Dodd introduced complementary bills that would speed up the Fed's timeline and do more to rein in an industry that most agree has been running wild for too long. Getting away with things like raising interest rates without warning, charging high fees for minor mistakes like being slightly late paying a bill, pushing cards on young people and sticking parents with the debt, penalizing consumers for late payments but never rewarding them for paying on time, and jacking up interest rates based on late payments on other unrelated bills.
These practices are so complicated that many consumers do not even understand them, and therefore they need to be protected from them.
After 3 days of requesting interviews from over a dozen banking lobbyists, I persuaded the credit card industry's chief spokesman to grant me 3 minutes on camera. I wanted him to comment on the practices the bills in Congress are meant to stop, but he steered the conversation to his main talking point, that the Federal Reserve regulations had gone far enough.
Some of the practices that have come out in the past couple days, sort of increasing people's rates when they're a little bit behind on a payment, universal default where they're late on a water bill and then they have their interest rate increased. What do you say about those?
There's a lot of untruths with the fact pattern that you just posed, but as a practical matter, the Federal Reserve has stepped up and said a lot of practices they don't consider appropriate, they want to have stopped. And the businesses recognize that, and they're going to have to, and they're all retooling right now. It's really what the Fed has done is unprecedented in scope in terms of reworking the operations of institutions. And as a practical matter, institutions are going to stop engaging in some of the practices that are being discussed. What we're talking about now is the fear of piling on and the concern that may end up hurting the consumer.
That the cure is going to be worse than...
Clayton's argument was echoed by the bill's opponents in Congress.
My greatest fear again, is that we will see interest rates rise, that we may see added fees, that we may see credit cards withdrawn from individuals.
But consumer advocates say that it was easy credit that brought the economy to its knees in the first place.
If we haven't learned from the economic crisis that too much credit can hurt people, we'll never learn it. Credit can be positive for families that can afford it. Credit can be incredibly damaging. It can ruin the lives of families that can't afford it. Look at the folks who are losing their homes. Look at the folks who can't afford their credit card loans. The next stop for them is bankruptcy. One of the big lessons of the current crisis is that credit isn't always good. In Congress, some members of Congress still don't get it.
The House seems certain to pass a bill later this year. but in the Senate, key Republicans are working to weaken the bill's regulations. And the credit card industry will keep pushing to delay or derail any congressional action.
They are not giving up. They will continue because every delay means another customer whose rate they can raise, whose penalty fees they can impose, and they want that money.